partly, I see her over there, and partly because, over here, there you are.
Everybody wants to be his mother, right?
And partly because when I was in freshman in college, I came to the Orpheum to watch the Ramones. And partly because it's so great to be with this charged up group of people and get to listen to Charles Neville just sort of blow the house away. And all of that good feeling makes me all the more cognizant of the fact that my basic role in life is to be a professional bummer-outer of other people. And for that, I really apologize. We'll end on a high note. But I got to begin by telling you the truth, which is that happy as I am to be here tonight, we really should not have to be here. Not on a rational planet. You know, the world found out about climate change 25 years ago. I played my small part in that by writing the first book for a general audience about climate change, The End of Nature, way back in 1989, i.e. before a lot of you were born. And if the world worked as it should, our leaders and our institutions would have long since heeded that alarm and paid careful attention to the scientists and gone to work, and then we'd be well on our way to dealing with this problem. But none of that happened. So that's Naomi Klein up on the screen getting arrested. You'll meet her in a minute. And that's my friend Gus Speth getting arrested, I think. They're on the first day of those big protests against the Keystone Pipeline last year. They were two of the 1,253 people there who eventually went to jail in what did turn out to be the biggest civil disobedience action about anything in 30 years. But we should not have had to go on. You know, 2 months before that, Jim Hansen, our most important climatologist, had said, if we burn that tar sands oil on top of everything else we're burning, it's game over for the climate. You would think that that would have slowed somebody down, but it didn't. Not the Obama administration, not industry, not anybody. It was full speed ahead until people put their bodies on the line. When we were in jail, Gus Speth was in the cell next to mine, and we were talking through the bars, and his son was a big deal lawyer, so he was the only one of the 80 people in our cell block who got to see a lawyer, and the question was, we could smuggle out through him a message to the press, and what should he say? Now, Gus was 72 when he was arrested, and he'd done every responsible, right-minded thing that anyone could do. He'd founded the Natural Resources Defense Council. He'd been chair of the President's Council on Environmental Quality. He'd been head of the United Nations Development Program. He'd been dean at Yale. The one sentence he sent out to the press, one sentence, was just this. He said, I've been in a lot of important positions in this town, but none of them seem as important to me as this one. Truth be told, no night seems as important to me as these nights that this tour was launched. We started the night after the election. We're headed out across the country. It's been powerful, packed out houses every night of people fired up, ready to go. It feels to me like it may be the start of the last campaign that I get to fight. Not because I'm too tired, though I must say the whole sleeping in the back of the tour bus thing is a little more romantic in theory than in practice. But it's the planet that's getting tired. We're reaching real limits. We're running out of time. That's what the world is telling us. It doesn't depress me exactly. In a certain sense, I'm more excited than I've ever been, because I think that we know now what we need to do, that we've peeled away some of the layers of the onion, that we're getting closer to the heart of things. As of tonight, we're going after the fossil fuel industry. that's trying to wreck the future, so we're going to try and take away some of their money. The work to do that will be hard, and it won't all be exciting. Some of you may have to go to jail before all this is over, but long before that, you'll have to do the much drier or harder work of being a citizen of a campus or a community or a state or a nation, the petitions, the meetings, the Facebooking, all the things that we do now. Some of it will be uncomfortable. It'll involve asking, good people and good institutions to change their ways. I can't completely promise you that it's going to be victorious, although, the odds are not, I suppose, exactly on our side. But I was a TV guy interviewing me the other day, being skeptical in the way that journalists are. He said, "This just seems impossible to me. This seems like one of those David and Goliath fights." And I was like, "Yeah, it seems very..." And then I thought, no, I'm a Methodist Sunday school teacher. I know how this story comes out. It wins. I'm not certain we're going to win, but I am certain that I can say sort of the same thing that Gus said that day from the top bunk in cell 17. It's that none of you can be in a more important place than you are tonight. Very few people around ever get to say at any given moment, "I'm doing the most important thing that I could be doing." But if you will be in this fight, that is you. This is the biggest problem, the biggest crisis that human beings have ever run up against. We have a very short time to deal with it. You're in the small percentage of human beings who really understand what it's about. If you'll be part of this fight, you'll be part of history in a really, really deep way. Really deep way. So, let's get to work, okay? We're calling this the Do the Math Tour, but don't worry, not calculus, okay? Just a few numbers, 3 numbers. I first wrote about him this summer in a piece for Rolling Stone that went oddly viral. Okay? It was the issue with Justin Bieber on the cover. But I knew that something odd was going on. I got a phone call a couple of days later from the editor of Rolling Stone. And he was like, "This is very strange, but your piece has 10 times as many likes on Facebook as Justin's." Really is due in part to my soulful stare, but mostly because it really laid out the kind of math in a new way that helped people get it. So we're going to get to those numbers. Here's the backstory. Before we get to them, here's where we are right now. Okay? So far, we've burned enough coal and gas and oil to raise the temperature of the planet 1 degree. And what has that done? One day in September, the headline in the newspaper said, "Half the polar ice cap is missing." Okay? Literally. If Neil Armstrong were still alive and looking down from the moon, he'd see half as much ice as he saw 40 years ago. Think about that. We've taken one of the 4 or 5 great physical features on the Earth, and we have broken it. Okay? And the other ones are kind of right behind. Think about the oceans, our kind of metaphor for vastness and bigness. Think about the beautiful Atlantic, half a mile from here. It and every other ocean on Earth, 30% more acidic than they were 40 years ago because the chemistry of seawater changes as it absorbs carbon from the atmosphere. Think about the atmosphere. The atmosphere is 5% wetter than it was 40 years ago because warm air holds more water vapor than cold. It's a staggering change in a basic physical parameter of the Earth, and what it does is load the dice for drought and for flood. Think about what happened this summer. Think about the most fertile farmland on the face of the Earth across the Midwest. It got too hot to grow things there. July 2012 was the hottest month in the history of the United States. Any month, any year. Think about what it looked like a couple of weeks ago in New York, There's not supposed to be water in we were in the Holocene, back to where we were for the 10,000 years of human civilization that all of us were born into. But that's not on the menu. That's not one of the options for the moment. All we're trying to do now is avert complete catastrophe. And here's how the world's powers have defined complete catastrophe. It's the first of these three numbers, okay? It's 2 degrees Celsius. It's twice what we've raised the temperature so far, right? And it's way too much. If 1 degree melts the Arctic, 2 degrees will be a lot worse, but in political terms, it's the only thing that everybody's agreed on. The G8, the G20, you will recall that completely dismal conference in Copenhagen when the world was supposed to solve this problem, but nobody was willing to step up and take charge at all. Finally, on the last day, they whipped together a kind of 2-page accord, entirely voluntary, no timetables, no penalties. It had one number in it, 2 degrees. Everybody pledged to make sure the temperature wouldn't go above that. You know, the EU, Japan, Russia, South Africa, even countries that make their money selling oil, the United Arab Emirates, the most conservative, recalcitrant, reluctant country. China signed it. Even the United States signed on to it. Okay? If the world officially believes anything about climate change, it's that 2 degrees is too much. It's the reddest of red lines, so that's the first number, 2 degrees. Now, to help us with the second number, I'm incredibly proud to bring on my old dear friend and a board member at 350.org and one of the great writers in the English language, Naomi Klein. It's not even close. Now that coal and gas and oil is still physically below the ground, but economically it's above the ground. That's what sets the share price for Shell or Exxon. When Peabody Coal wants to borrow money, that's what they use as collateral. At current market prices, it's worth more than $25 trillion. And unless we figure out a way to intervene, it's going to be burned, okay? That's the thing. There's no longer any room for speculation or wishful thinking or doubt. The future is written out. Let's look at I think we have a graph that kind of shows it. The blue is how much carbon there was in the atmosphere before the Industrial Revolution. The lavender is how much we've added since. That raised the temperature 1 degree. Okay, the red line up there is how much more carbon we could emit and stay below 2 degrees. And the rest of that, that's what the fossil fuel industry wants to burn. That's what they're going to burn unless we stop them. The numbers show, and this is the one thing I want you to take away, if nothing else from tonight, that this industry is now a kind of rogue force. They're outlaws, not against the laws of the state. They get to write those, more or less. But they are outlaws against the laws of physics, all right? Exxon alone has in its reserves 7% of the carbon necessary to take us past 2 degrees. One company with one CEO, one board of directors. Here are the two choices. Okay? Exxon has to give in and change what it's going to do and all the others with it, or physics has to give in. Okay? It's going to be extremely difficult to change Exxon's mind. They're the richest company on earth. But it's going to be harder to change physics' mind. Okay? So that's the task. A task that Naomi will explicate a little